The sun had long begun its descent when Nena wiped the sweat off her forehead with the edge of her faded wrapper. The wooden mop she clutched had seen better days, much like herself, worn, tired, yet still standing. The empty corridors of Obiagu Community Secondary School echoed the distant laughter of students heading home, their carefree voices a stark contrast to the silence in Nena's heart. She had worked as a cleaner in the school for years, scrubbing floors, wiping desks, and sweeping hallways that once held the dreams of children. But for her, there was no child to dream for, no child to call her own. Life had taken and taken from her, leaving her with only memories of a man she once loved, a husband she had buried too soon. That evening, as she pushed open the last classroom door to lock up, she froze. A boy sat alone at the back of the room, hunched over a wooden desk, his frail fingers clenching the edge as if the seat was his last hold on safety. He couldn't have been more than 10 years old, but the way he sat, shoulders stiff, head low, was not the posture of a child. It was that of someone who had seen too much, felt too much. Nena took a cautious step inside. "Nah, school done close. Why you still day here?" The boy didn't answer immediately. He lifted his head, and when their eyes met, something tightened in Nena's chest. His eyes. There was something about them. A depth beyond his years, a sharpness yet filled with a quiet pain, a loneliness that mirrored her own. He cleared his throat. "Auntie, I know get where to go." Her heart skipped. "Where your papa and mama?" He hesitated. "Demmed on die." A chill ran down Nena's spine. She had seen hungry children before, neglected ones too. But this boy was different. His English was sharp, precise, unlike the others who played and shouted in broken pidgin. His voice carried a quiet intelligence, as though he had been raised with love once, before life took it all away. She walked closer, sitting on the desk beside him. "You mean say you dey live alone?" His small hands tightened into fists. "Dems say I be bad luck. My uncle drive me comot. My auntie say I be burden." His throat bobbed, his voice breaking for the first time. "I sleep for corridor yesterday. I know one beg. I know one steal. I want go school." Nena closed her eyes briefly. Pain, hunger, rejection. She knew them too well. She looked down at herself, her worn slippers, her faded blouse, her rough palms that smelled of soap and sweat. She had nothing, not even a proper home. Just a small rented room where the roof leaked when it rained. But in that moment, staring at this boy, she knew. She could not walk away. Her voice was steady when she spoke. "You done chop today." The boy shook his head, lips pressed together. She exhaled, rubbed her hands over her face, then stood up. "Come, we dey go house." He blinked. "Go house?" She forced a small smile. "E be like saying a God send you come meet me today." For the first time, the boy's eyes widened, not in fear, but in something like hope. And as they stepped out into the dimming evening, Nena realized something. Maybe God had sent him for her too. The one-room apartment smelled of soap, damp clothes, and the faint aroma of old wood. It wasn't much, just a tiny bed, a rickety table, and a few plastic chairs. But to Obinna, it was more than he had in a long time. A roof, a space, a chance. Nena watched him as he walked in slowly, taking everything in. She could see it in his eyes, the way he looked at even the smallest things like the cracked walls and the mosquito net hanging unevenly over the window. To another child, this was nothing. But to him, it was everything. She dropped her nylon bag of bread and a small bottle of groundnut on the table. "No plenty food for here, but we go manage," she said. He turned to her, and for the first time he smiled, small, hesitant, but real. "Thank you," he whispered. That night, they sat on the floor and shared a small plate of soaked Gary and groundnut. Nena watched him as he ate, carefully, not greedily, as if he had trained himself not to show hunger. "Wetin you sabi do?" she asked. He swallowed, wiped his mouth. "I sabi read." Her brows lifted. "Read?" He nodded. "My papa and mama been they read to me before." He trailed off, staring at his hands. "Before dem go." Something twisted in Nena's chest. After they ate, she stretched out a small mat for him. "Tomorrow, I go clean school. You go fit. Stay here." "I go wait," he said simply. Each morning, she left before dawn to sweep classrooms and scrub toilets. By the time she returned, sweaty and exhausted, she expected to find Obinna sleeping or staring out the window, like most children with no distractions would. But he was always reading. She noticed the first time and thought nothing of it. Then it happened again and again. She would return home and there he was, hunched over old tattered books she had forgotten she owned, flipping through pages as though his life depended on it. He sat by the small candle at night, whispering words as he read, repeating them, understanding them. One evening, she leaned against the door and watched him. "Now wetin you dey read?" Obinna looked up, startled. "I want know things," he said softly, "even if na small." She studied him. There was something different about this boy, not just his sharp mind, but his determination, his hunger, not for food but for knowledge. She walked in and sat beside him. "Obinna, no be every pickin' like book like this. Why you different?" His fingers traced the old letters on the page. "Because if I sabi plenty things, maybe one day, nobody fit push me comet again." Her breath caught. She stared at him, at this little boy who had already seen the cruelty of life but still had the fire to fight. Some days were worse than others. The money she made cleaning barely covered rent, let alone food. There were nights when their dinner was just plain water, and their stomachs groaned louder than their voices. On one of those nights, as they sat in silence, stomachs empty, Nena sighed. "Obinna, I done try. I no fit give you wettin, I no get." He looked at her, expression serious. "Auntie, we dey breathe, we dey alive." His small lips curled into a soft smile. "E mean say hope still day." Nena's throat tightened. A 10-year-old boy was telling her to hold on, encouraging her when she was supposed to be the strong one. She turned away to blink back tears. Hope still day. The decision sat heavy on Nena's chest like a bag of cement. For weeks she had saved from the little she earned, coins tucked away beneath her mattress, folded Naira notes hidden in her old Bible, all with one goal in mind, to enroll Obinna in school. It was what he deserved. A child like him, bright, eager, born to learn, belonged in a classroom, not stuck in their cramped one-room space flipping through old books. But life, as always, was unkind. The school fees at the government secondary school where she worked as a cleaner, though cheaper than private schools, was still too much. Even with everything she had saved, it wouldn't cover tuition, books, and the extra charges teachers often demanded. The final blow came one afternoon when she overheard two teachers gossiping. "That widow won register one pekin for school. Abeg, how she won take pay? Make dem no come disgrace 'em later when she no fit afford exam money." Shame crawled up her spine. She had already imagined it, paying the first term's fees, then struggling, borrowing, begging for the next. What if she couldn't keep up? What if Obinna was sent home? She would not put him through that. Still, the decision to hold back pained her, especially because she saw how much Obinna longed for school. Some days, when she returned from work, she caught him staring at the school children walking past their small compound, boys in faded blue shorts, girls in checkered pinafores, laughing, shouting, swinging their school bags. He never said anything. He never asked why he wasn't among them. But the way he stared, silent, lost, yearning, was enough. One day she asked, "Obinna, you still want go school?" He hesitated before nodding slowly. "Yes," she swallowed hard. "I fit no fit put you for school now." He looked at her, eyes unreadable. "I sabi." Nena exhaled. Of course he knew. This boy understood too much for his age. That night she lay awake thinking. If she couldn't give him school, what else could she give? And then it came to her. The next morning, instead of leading him to the school gates, she led him to a noisy, grease-stained workshop by the roadside, Ifeanyi and Sons Mechanics. Obinna looked around, confused. The smell of burnt engine oil, the clang of metal tools, the sight of men bent over broken-down cars, their hands black with grease. "Auntie, why are we here?" he asked. Nena turned to him, her expression unreadable. "You will learn work." His face fell. He didn't argue, but she saw it, the way his fingers twitched, the slight slump in his shoulders. This wasn't the future he had dreamed of. As they waited for the mechanic to finish his work, and Nena crouched before him. "Obinna, I know you want to go to school," she said gently, "but not every dream will start the way we want." He didn't respond, just listened. "I may not be able to put you in school now, but I can give you a skill," she continued. "Something no one can ever take from you. If you learn this work, it means that even if tomorrow is bad, you will still be able to survive. You will still be able to help yourself." Obinna swallowed hard, his lips pressing together. "But can I still read books?" She smiled, rubbing his shoulder. "You will still read. I will make sure you don't forget what you already know. But for now, you will learn this work." The mechanic, Master Ifeanyi, a stout, muscular man with a scar running across his forearm, watched them quietly before nodding. "She knows what she is doing," he finally said. "School is not everything. If the boy is serious, he will learn quickly." While other boys carried school bags, he carried spanners. While they sat in classrooms, he crouched under cars. While they memorized textbooks, he memorized the whine of an engine, the weight of a wrench, the smell of petrol. But still, every night, after the long hours at the workshop, he came home, washed his hands, and picked up an old book. And Nena? She watched him, praying that somehow this road, though different, would still lead him to the future he deserved. It wasn't that he was ungrateful. He knew Nena had given him all she could, had chosen this path for him because she believed it was the best. But still, he was just a boy. Some mornings, when he woke up, his body felt too heavy for his small frame. His arms ached from carrying heavy tools, his palms were covered in tiny blisters, and his back stiffened from bending under cars for too long. He was the youngest apprentice at the workshop, smaller than the others, weaker. The older boys, strong-limbed teenagers with hardened faces, barely spoke to him. They didn't see him as competition, nor did they see him as an equal. Just a small boy struggling to fit into a world of men, to tell Nena that he didn't belong here, that he was too small for this kind of work, that his hands weren't strong enough to twist stubborn bolts, that his fingers were meant for pens, not spanners. But he never said a word, because how could he? She had done too much for him already. She was the only person who had cared, the only one who had given him a home, food, and a reason to wake up each day. So he swallowed his complaints. He held in his frustration. He carried his small, aching body to the workshop every morning, gripping his tools as if his life depended on it, because in a way, it did. Nena never heard him. He made sure of that. He would curl up on the small mat in the corner of their tiny room, bury his face in his arms, and let the tears come. Not loud, not desperate, just silent tears that soaked into the rough fabric beneath him. He missed his parents. He missed the days when he could just be a child. He missed the school he never got to attend. But when morning came, he wiped his face, stood up, and kept moving. Because weak or not, tired or not, hopeless or not, he had made up his mind. He would not remain like this forever. He would become somebody. One day, people would hear his name and they would never call him useless again. And so, even when his body ached, he pushed through. Even when the older boys ignored him, he focused. 3 years later, and Obinna was no longer the weak little boy who struggled with spanners and oil stains. He had grown, not just in size but in skill. His hands were now steady, his mind sharp, his ears trained to hear even the faintest problem in an engine. Even Master Ifeanyi, A man who rarely gave praise had started calling on him when the older apprentices struggled. "Obinna, come check it." And like magic, Obinna would step forward, diagnosing problems even some of the senior boys missed. They noticed, and they hated it. They had been there longer, they were older, stronger. But it was the small boy, the one they used to laugh at, that was getting attention. Envy is an ugly thing, and soon their jealousy turned into something dangerous. It was a big job, one that had the whole workshop buzzing. A wealthy customer had come in, requesting an engine replacement for his luxury car. Ifeanyi had ordered a brand new engine box, and the apprentices had worked all day under the scorching sun, fixing it in place. By evening, the job was done. The car sat in the corner of the shop, its new engine purring softly, waiting for the owner to come pick it up the next morning. That night, Obinna went home feeling proud. He had worked hard on that car. He had turned the spanners, wiped the oil, checked and double-checked the fittings. He had done his best, but by morning everything had changed. Obinna stood frozen, his heartbeat pounding against his ribs like a hammer. "Did you steal my engine box?" Master Ifeanyi's voice wasn't just angry, it was dangerous. Obinna shook his head furiously. "Ogre, I swear I did not touch it." But the workshop was dead silent. The apprentices stood in a half circle, their eyes filled with mockery, hatred, satisfaction. "That's a lie," Ekeni spat. "You've seen that Ogre favors you, so you think you can run your own business, sell the engine box behind our back?" Obinna's mouth fell open. "No, Ogre, I swear on my life I didn't." "Shut up!" Ifeanyi's roar made everyone flinch. Obinna staggered back, his whole body trembling. "Ogre, please!" But Ifeanyi had already pulled out his phone. "Officer, I have a thief here." Obinna couldn't breathe. His hands were sweating, his legs felt weak, his mind was screaming, but the words wouldn't come out. "Ogre, please, it wasn't me!" But Ifeanyi wasn't listening. Minutes later, the wailing sound of a police van cut through the air. The officers arrived looking bored and impatient, as if this was just another day. "Is it this one?" One of them pointed at Obinna. "Yes," Ifeanyi spat. "He will show you where he hid my engine box." The officer grabbed Obinna by the collar. "Ogre, I swear." His voice cracked, tears burning his eyes. "I didn't do anything." But they didn't care. They didn't ask questions. They didn't look for proof. They didn't hesitate. The slap came hard and fast, sending him to the ground, a dirty boot pressed against his back. "Criminal," one of them muttered. "Take him to the station." And just like that, his world collapsed. His head snapped to the side, the sting burning his cheek. His ears rang. The small, cramped police station cells smelled of sweat, urine, and hopelessness. "Talk!" the officer barked, his beer belly stretching the buttons of his uniform. "Where did you hide it? Who did you sell it to?" Obinna's lips trembled. "Ogre, I didn't steal anything." Another slap. Harder. His small body hit the wall of the cell. His knees wobbled. Tears burned his eyes, but he refused to let them fall. If he cried, they would think he was guilty. The moment Ifeanyi had called the police, everything became a nightmare. Obinna had been dragged to the station, his protests falling on deaf ears. "Small child like you steal an engine box?" one officer had mocked. "Who taught you? Do you have a gang?" No matter how much he swore on his life, they didn't believe him. The cell was dark, the air thick with despair. The other prisoners, hardened criminals, men who had seen things too terrible to speak of, stared at him like he was fresh meat. That first night, they beat him. Not because he did anything, but because in a place like this, weakness was an invitation. By the time morning came, his face was swollen, his lip busted, his ribs aching. He wanted to die. 2 days later, he heard her voice. "Nena." "Auntie, please, he's just a small boy. He can't have done this." "My son is not a thief." Her voice cracked, raw and desperate. She must have borrowed money for bail. She must have pleaded, cried, begged. And when they finally dragged him out of the cell, his legs barely carried him. The moment she saw him, she gasped. Her trembling hands touched his swollen face. Obinna. He wanted to smile to tell her he was fine, but his mouth hurt too much. Everything hurt. Master Ifeanyi was standing there, arms crossed, looking at him with disgust. The apprentices smirked in the background, pleased with themselves. He's a thief, but since you say you'll take him away, go on, the officer grunted, waving them away. Nena gripped his hand like she would never let go. And for the first time, Obinna felt something he had buried for years. Shame, even though he was innocent, even though he had done nothing wrong. He felt dirty. That evening, he sat outside their tiny home staring at the dirt road. He didn't want to go back. Ever. Not to the stairs, not to the whispers, not to the humiliation. But Nena stood beside him. Do you want to let them win? Her voice was hoarse from crying. He swallowed, looking away. Master Ifeanyi hates me. They'll never trust me again. She exhaled deeply, crouching in front of him. Obinna, you're not fighting for them. You're fighting for yourself. Silence. She placed a trembling hand on his chest. If you run now, the lie will follow you forever. Even if you didn't touch that engine box, they'll always call you a thief. His throat tightened. Do you want to make thief your name? His lips parted, but no words came out. She cupped his bruised face, eyes glistening. My son is not a thief. Obinna looked away, blinking back tears. She sighed. They've beaten you, they've disgraced you, but they've never broken you. His breath hitched. You are my son, and you must hold your head up. She straightened, her voice firm. Tomorrow morning, you go back. His head snapped up. Auntie, I can't. You must. Her voice was sharp, the voice of a woman who had lost too much to let her son lose himself too. Do you want to be somebody in life, or not? She asked, her eyes piercing into his soul. He nodded slowly. Then go back. He stiffened. Master will not agree. Then prove him wrong. Her voice was gentle, but it hit him like a slap. The next morning, his feet felt heavy as he walked back to the workshop. The apprentices laughed when they saw him. See who came back. He's not ashamed. He still wants to steal something else. Obinna ignored them. He walked straight to Ifeanyi, eyes steady. Master, I'll work for free. Just let me stay and prove that I didn't do it. Ifeanyi narrowed his eyes. Silence stretched between them. Then, with a grunt, the man turned away and walked inside. He didn't send Obinna away. The road back would not be easy. The whispers would not stop overnight. The trust would take years to rebuild. But he had made his choice. He would not run. What do you think about Nena's advice for Obinna to return to the mechanic's workshop and prove his innocence? Is it a good choice, or should he have walked away? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to subscribe to support our growth and get notified when we upload new videos on the channel.